Webinar will start shortly. Webinar will start in 5 minutes. Good afternoon, all. A very warm welcome to you all to this inaugural function of 3 days international webinar series. Myself, Sushant Thorat, Assistant Professor, Department of Forensic Science, Yashwantrao Chavan Institute of Science, Satara. We will start with the felicitation. Now, I would request Dr. A.R. Mari ma'am to felicitate Director of the Institute, Dr. B.T. Zadav. Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to request Mr. Vikram Hunkare to felicitate Vice Principal of the Institute, Dr. V.Y. Deshpande. We are privileged that Director of our Institute allowed us to organize this webinar. Now, I would request Dr. A.R. Mari ma'am for the welcome and introduction of the chief guest.
A very good afternoon and warm welcome to one and all present here. I heartily welcome today's chief guest, Dr. Vilas Padde sir, Head, Department of Psychology, Elphinstone College, Mumbai. President of this inaugural function, Principal Dr. B.T. Jadhav sir, Yashwantrao Chavan Institute of Science, Satara. Vice Principal of our institute, Dr. Deshpande sir, in charge coordinator Hankare sir, all heads of our departments, all faculty members of forensic science department as well as our institute, and all dear participants. Thank you for joining us in the 3 days international webinar series. It's my privilege or it's my pleasure to walk you through the webinar series, introduce you to the speakers that have joined from all over the country to share their knowledge and enhance our mental horizon. I am very glad to say that for today's webinar series, near about 568 students participated from various forensic institutes from all over India. The theme of the webinar is the application of scientific technology to provide accurate and objective information reflecting the events. Forensic ballistics involves the examination of evidence from firearms that may have been used in the crime, and forensic limnology, which is the subfield of the forensic botany. The various topics covered in this webinar series are psychological disorders, forensic ballistics at the glance, and significance of the forensic immunology. We have experts for this webinar, Dr. Kapil Kumar, Department of Forensic Science, Gujarat University, Shraddha Naiti, forensic scientist, New Jersey, USA, who will stay with us for next 2 days and sharing their thoughts and opinion with us. The major outcome of this webinar series has always been the betterment of our students and introduce students with forensic concepts which are useful in crime investigation. Let me introduce the first dynamic speaker and today's chief guest, Dr. Vilas Padde sir. He is working as Head Department of Psychology, Elphinstone College, Mumbai. He is selected by MPSC for the post of lecturer and joined in 1997 as a lecturer. Padde sir published 14 research papers in national and international journal. He has written 2 books in psychology. I am very happy to say that Padde sir has received prestigious award in 2006 and the name of the award is Rajiv Gandhi Prasashakiya Gatimanta Award. Padde sir also write and produce animated short film Let's Save Bobby, which won many awards. So this is the brief introduction of our first speaker, Dr. Vilas Padde sir. I would like to conclude my speech by encouraging the students to participate with an increasing number in the free discussion after each session through digital platform for the next 3 days. I wish everyone a successful, safe and fruitful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the welcome and introduction. Now, I would like to request today's chief guest, Dr. Vilas Padde sir, to express their views. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Vikram, just allow me to check if my mic is working. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Yes, thank you so much. At the outset, I pay my obeisance to Karmavir Bhaurao Patil and Yashwantrao Chauhan, two luminaries, sons of the soil, who have education not just in Maharashtra but in the country. Pleasure and honor for me to be invited to this institute. Honorable Dr. B.T. Jadhav sir, Dr. Deshpande sir, Mari madam, and my dear student Vikram Hankare, all my colleagues, friends, students, ladies and gentlemen. I would the for organizing this wonderful international webinar. I have chosen some interesting topics on one hand, statistics on the other, and topic of subfield botany, that is limnology, that deals with molecules. Okay, someone is speaking. My voice is breaking. Okay, I hope technological problem does not stay for long. So, as I congratulate the forensic science department. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay, because there are a lot of statements coming from the chats that my voice is not clear. So I'm not very sure whether the issue is from my side or somewhere in between. So should I continue, Vikram?
Yes, sir. Your voice is breaking, but there is network issue from your end.
Okay, okay.
Uh, Sir, try your turn off your video so you will get better bandwidth and we can hear you clearly.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You are audible now.
Yes, I have changed my network now. Hopefully, this problem does not persist. No matter what you do with technology and broadband and all those things, but you never know something that pops up on the 11th hour. So, without wasting much time, allow me to move ahead. Honorable dignitaries on the dais and Vikram and all the fellow faculty members. Congratulations in organizing this wonderful webinar. Uh, the importance of the field of forensic science is known to each and every one of us, especially as technology progresses, so do modes of crime, and criminals are always unfortunately one step ahead of the law, and the law always does this catching up business. And that is where people trained in forensic sciences play the most important role, because somewhere it is not possible for the lawmakers by themselves to keep pace of all the technological changes. And this beautiful field of forensic psychology actually fills the void or the vacuum or the gap in between. So you talk about, let's say, the internet, for example. Look at the various type of crimes that are being committed, especially in this lockdown period, as are all the transactions and everything is going on online. The the criminals are also having a field day, because they find this, they take this as an opportunity to swindle people further. So whether it is a crime scene which involves a murder, we have seen those suicide cases, whether it was a suicide or a murder, and the entire nation was agog with conspiracy theories. But ultimately, it comes down to investigation, because we do not rely upon news reporters and all the fuss that is created around that. Ultimately, it comes down to science, and that is where the field of forensic psychology plays the most crucial role. So whether it is crime scenes or it is the other end of the spectrum like internet and technology, or as I deal with the subject of psychology, the mens rea as it is called in law, what was the motive behind committing that crime? So look at the beautiful diverse fields that is covered by this discipline. So it's a wonderful idea to have a webinar on all these topics. As I said, Vikram is it gives me twice the pleasure to see him here, because he is a student of my first batch of forensic science. I was holding the additional charge there, and as a teacher, it nothing gives you more pleasure than see your students contribute meaningfully and constructively to the society. So Vikram, congratulations for that. And I think it's already 15:31. So I have a 1 hour lecture in front of me. So given this beautiful webinar that we are all into, allow me to take your leave for now, and I hand it over to the organizers, and I shall join you with the lecture once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Your views on forensic psychology will be very beneficial for the students and the participants. Now, I would like to request Honorable Director of our institute, Dr. B.T. Jadhav, for presidential address.
Thank you, sir. Friends, it gives me an immense pleasure being as a part of the inaugural function of the international webinar, which is organized by the Department of Forensic Science, Yeshwantrao Chavan Institute of Science, Satara, Maharashtra. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Department of Forensic Science and all the faculties, as well as head of the department, Dr. Mali Madam, and in charge, Dr. Hankare sir and his team. Being as a chief of this institute, there are various participants from the different states and the students, as well as some researchers are there, teachers are there. Being as in charge of the institute, once again I welcome all the participants and the research students and friends. During this COVID situation, department has selected the very good topic, which is very important in this COVID situation, because in this situation, in the situation of the COVID-19, so many are working from the home. Many students are doing their work from home. Many employers, officers, so many students. Many people are working from home. And due to the compulsory sitting and the worry about the future, there are many of us are in the stress. And due to the lot of stress, economical problem, study problem, they are worried about the future for their employability, as well as so many problems are with the all of us. And so that some of us are under the stress, and due to that psychology disorder may be there. But in this situation, we have to support such peoples and the students, as well as some farmers may be there, some employers may be there, some officers may be there, and they feel that they have no any problem, but they can't observe themselves in a different manner. They are saying that they are well and they are working properly, but their behavior changes, and someone has observed that he has some trace, and psychologically in future he may be disorder. So we have to find out such peoples and support in a well manner, because if they depress, if they have some difficulties, then it is our role to support them in a very polite manner, and we have to support them to show them we have to conduct visits of the expert with them. That is our role. So in this COVID situation, topic selected by the Department of Forensic Science is very effective, because it is very helpful to the society and students, as well as uh, the person who are working from the home in this COVID situation. As per my knowledge, there are various disorders. Whatever I learn, whatever I listen, whatever I read, as per as my knowledge, there may be clinical depression. Some are the axillary disorders are there. Someone is saying that there are bipolar disorder may be there. Some have the eating disorder, some have listening disorder. I think that there is a one type mood disorder may be there. So these are the various disorders, and some people doing their speech, they have some trace, and due to that trace also during their speech, due to the trace, uh, sometime we observe the psychological disorder, some communication disorder may be there, attention disorder may be there, some type of small disorders are there during the student, when we talk about the student, when we observe the student, when we observe our kids in a very careful manner. At that time we observe many disorders. Initially that is not a disease, disorder is not a disease, but that is a behavior as per as my knowledge. So if such students are surrounding to us, some people are surrounding to us, so we have to support such students, and the sometime parents may have some disorder, some employees may have disorder. So my opinion is that we have to support such peoples, because uh, people are not freely speaking about that uh, disorder, and they think that they are well, so they have no any disorder. But sometimes we observe such type of disorder into the people. So in a very polite manner we will support them, and I think that in this COVID situation, and that topic selected by the department is very fruitful to all of us. So on as a principal of the college, I congratulate once again, and give the best wishes for this webinar. So many resource persons have invited, and all these resource persons are very intelligent. They have their good faith and work in their topics. So once again, I welcome all the resource person and the friends, students, researchers, and thankful to Dr. Mali Madam and his team, because they have uh, uh, they have the, I think that it is 4 days international activity. So thankful to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the presidential address and the inspirational words. Now, I would like to request Mr. Hankare, sir, to propose vote of thanks of the inaugural session. And the first session of the webinar will start right after the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sushant sir. A lovely and warm afternoon to our most valued and worthy guests, the dignitaries, respected teachers, and my beloved friends. It's a matter of pride for me that I am proposing a vote of thanks for this inaugural session. I, on behalf of my colleagues and the entire community, first of all, spread my most sincere thanks to the chief guest who gave his vital time from his busy schedule to grace this occasion. I would like to place my hearty thanks to the president and other dignitaries, participants, and my friends. I can't give thanks to everyone for their participation and mobility to take on the accomplishment of this session work. Once again, I would like to state that we are glad to all the dignitaries here over the inaugural session. Thank you for being with us. I has remained a mention remained Have a great day ahead. With the permission of dignitaries, I declare that this inaugural session is finished. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sushant sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hankare sir, for the vote of thanks. Now we are moving ahead with the first session. I would request Dr. Vilas Padhe sir to start the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So I would like to present my screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have the permission. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, Sushant sir, is the screen visible and am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, but your screen is not visible yet.
Okay, no, I'll just. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. And sorry for those annoying questions, but given what technology is, it is always a good idea to be in the know that, the audio visuals are working properly. So, once again, I welcome you all to this wonderful international webinar organized by the Department of Forensic Science. And the topic that we have for discussion today in the first session is about understanding psychological disorders. Principal Dr. Jadhav sir just now mentioned, a few disorders, and he was absolutely right when he said that yes, there are some mood disorders and there are some anxiety disorders and some stress related disorders, and it is definitely our job as teachers, as educators, to be playing a very supportive and constructive role towards our students and their parents and towards society in general. So let us now begin with the very basic concept of psychological disorders. Unfortunately, the world view of psychological disorders is still completely in black and white. We are still in those archaic times, those medieval times where people suffering from certain psychological or mental disorders, as it's also called, are still referred to with extremely derogatory terms like he's a gone case, mad hai, mental hai, kaam se gaya hua hai, stuff like that, which is very unfortunate. What we need is we need to change this mindset towards psychological disorders in general, and we need a more sympathetic approach towards the patients. What we need is a more scientific approach which would be free of biases, of prejudices, and of stereotyping, and rather an approach that is based on objectivity, observation, and a clinical evaluation. So we have heard these stories, we call it hearsay, and we tend to stereotype patients, which is, something that does not allow them to feel that they are accepted back into society. And rather, if we have an approach that is objective, it's based on observations, we'll find that there is hardly any difference between them and us. Actually, it is not as black and white as we tend to see it. So with this, we shall take a look at what psychological disorders basically are and then move ahead with the further presentation. So dear friends, to begin with, what is psychology? When you talk about psychological disorders, what exactly do we mean by psychology? Well, psychology is the science of behavior and cognitive processes. So we deal with objective observable behavior, something that we call a stimulus response relationship, and we also infer many cognitive processes that are sort of hidden, that are dormant, and we have to infer them. So this would include all our actions, all our thought processes, or emotions, or perception. All these things are studied in psychology as to why a certain individual behaves in a certain way, why certain set of responses are given in a certain way to the thoughts and the emotions and the perceptions. So given this broad idea or definition of what psychology is, we shall now talk about a disorder. So when you talk about a disorder, what is important for us to understand is order. What do you call an order? So what is an order? It's simply a chain of events or a sequence of events that has to fall in a certain way. Once that order is broken, that is precisely what you call as a disorder, a disruption of order. I'll give you a very simple example. If you ask a primary school student to recite ABCD, and the student starts with A, B, C, E, B, D, F, G, or something, you say, no, no, stop, 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 stop. There is something wrong. What is wrong? What is wrong is the order. So you say it's not A, B, C, D, E, it is A, B, C, or A, B, C, E, F, G. You've forgotten D in between, so you have skipped the order. So it has to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. So the moment an order is broken, we find that this disruption of order is something that can create problems. Now, not exactly with ABCD, for example, but if you talk about larger orderly behavior in life, if you look at your own day-to-day life, the way you brush your teeth, it follows a certain order. The way you eat your food, it follows a certain order. The way you drive your car, it has a certain order. You have to first put the gear in neutral, then turn on the ignition, and then put into first gear and move on. If you change this order, you might end up bumping your car into someone. So the smallest of things that you follow in life, they usually tend to have a certain order. And whenever these what you call as orders are disrupted, so your actions, as you call them, there is a disruption in the order of your actions. The car example that I was giving you. So what happens if I ask you to make a cup of tea? So there is a person who keeps a vessel on the gas, on the stove, turns it on, and turns it off after 5 minutes, and then puts in water and milk and tea powder. So you'd say, no, that's not the way to make a tea. But he says, no, see, I've kept it on for 5 minutes, and there was water, and there is milk, and there is tea powder, but you have not followed the order. You can't heat the vessel and turn it off and then put the ingredients inside. So if someone is behaving in such a way, in every action that you see, you find that there is a certain disruption of order. You would certainly say, hey man, there's something wrong with you. Kuch to gadbad hai. There is something that you are doing. It is not following the logical sequence of events. The same is with thoughts, the same is with emotions. The way you think, the way you express your emotions, if that is not in an orderly fashion, when to express, how much to express. You go to a funeral and you say, oh, I feel very sorry for that. You go to a marriage and you say, congratulations. It is not important how sad or how happy you are, but these are socially acceptable responses that you give. So following these orders in society, we live our life, and the moment these orders are disrupted, then we find that a person is in what we call a problem area. There is a certain disorder. And then I've also included something that we call as bodily manifestations. So these manifestations, many times, these are gray areas or common areas between physiological disorders and psychological disorders. So many times, uh, these appear to be physical or physiological disorders, but the genesis or the causal factors are many times psychological in nature. Then there are certain myths about psychological disorders. To begin with, we feel that psychological disorders are uncurable. It is that, like I said, the black and white sort of perception that we have, that normal and abnormal are two entirely different watertight compartments. That a normal person is normal for life, and an abnormal person is abnormal for life. Another thing that we usually tend to believe is that it runs in the family. Well, there's no doubt that there are genetic factors, but definitely it's not something that has to run in the family. There are people who refuse to marry their what daughters into families because some uncle or some aunt was known to suffer from some disorder. So that is another myth that people hold. And unfortunately, that this is something to be ashamed of. You have to hide your mental problems and your psychological disorders. On the other hand, the reality is quite different. To begin with, it is curable. All right, 9 out of 10 disorders are curable. Why I'm saying 9 out of 10? Because like physiological disorders, there are those very few unfortunate patients whose disorder might not have the right solutions. As of now, science does not have answers to that. Then our so-called normal behavior is on a continuum. It's not in compartments of complete normal and complete abnormal. It's on a continuum that you know it's linked to what you did yesterday, to day before yesterday, to a day before that, and in this way into months and into years. And you find that yes, there have always been ups and downs. There have been periods when you have felt depressed, and there have been periods when you felt elated. So these ups and downs in life continue. So these are not necessarily watertight compartments, but these are rather a chain or a sequence of events. And then, as I said, not all disorders are genetic. Not everything runs in a family. Many of them are learned behaviors, unfortunately. And rather than being ashamed of, it is very important that you speak about it, and you get proper counseling and proper advice for from technical experts, from counselors, and you try to find a cure, a solution to your problems, which is perfectly doable. Now, another problem that we as psychologists and the society in general faces is the problem of labeling. By labeling, I mean, you can see on the left hand side there are so many disorders like a bipolar, an anorexia, or an ADHD, anxiety, and schizophrenia. So many of these disorders labeled over here. The moment you put a label to a person, it becomes stigmatic. All right, until and unless you don't know what the disorder is, अरे उसके छोटे problems है, that person is having a few problems, some problems, little problems, but the moment a label is stuck, the stigma follows immediately. And unfortunately, these labels, they stay for life. No matter the person has taken medications, is cured, but still unfortunately, people tend to look at it from a stigmatic point of view for the rest of the lives. That, oh, 10 years back usko hospital mein bharti kiya tha, that person was admitted, was given shocks or something like that. So this stigma simply refuses to go, which is extremely unfortunate. But the other advantage of labeling is that it allows you to systematize your observations. Whatever you see, instead of just using adjectives for that, you are rather using some scientific terminology, which also allows you to communicate in scientific terms. So one doctor wants to communicate with another. When he writes it down on a sheet of paper, the other doctor reads it and immediately understands what is the underlying disorder, because the label itself is self-explanatory. So there are advantages of labeling, advantages, and unfortunately there would be some disadvantages also. Now, the problem areas, like Principal Sir was mentioning about some of the problem areas and how we can actually support people, who have these problems. To begin with, it is important for us to understand what the problem areas could be. So essentially, these problem areas, they are behavioral, emotional, cognitive, and we could call them physiological or bodily, in simple terms. So if you are able to observe a person along these four dimensions, I think those changes in behavior, or those disorderliness in behavior, becomes immediately evident. So let us take a look at some of these problem areas with some common symptoms that are found. So when you talk about behavioral problem areas, we are talking about some of these set of problems. There is a lack of concentration, there is indecisiveness, you don't know what to do, there is low self-esteem, people just don't believe in themselves, I don't know what to do, I need help continuously. If I'm told, that yes, go ahead and do this, no, 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 I will not be able to do. The first, reaction is no, I will not be able to do. And then there is substance abuse, whether it's tobacco or smoking cigarettes, as we call it, or consuming alcohol. These substance abuses, are also some very common behavioral problems, and a certain degree of carelessness. So these a typical, set of symptoms, as you would call them. You could observe them and essentially see the changes in behavior. Now, like I said earlier, and I might also mention this with every problem area, that we all have been through this at some point of life or the other. I think there's hardly anyone who is living, what we call as a relatively normal life, who has never had a problem with concentration. Is it possible? No. At some point of time, maybe it's about a particular subject. All right, maybe it's about, a certain period of life, maybe because of certain issues at home, something to do with your professional life or with your educational life. You are not able to concentrate. See, this is quite common. All right, indecisiveness. So we do seek the help of others. Yaar, kuch samajh mein nahi aa raha, I'm not able to yaar understand what to do, please help me out on this. So these are some very, very, very common things. But there are two things that are there. One is intensity and the other is frequency. If you are continuously doing that, then these are definitely problem areas. If it is happening, once in a while, once in maybe a month or 2 months or something is not good with me, I'm not able to concentrate, even once in a month is not a great idea. But it does happen once in a while. I don't think these should be taken up as really very serious problems. But then, as I said, for a clinician, like the moment you have a stomach ache or a headache, if you observe your own behavior for the past 6 months, I'm very sure each one of you at some point of the time or the other must have had an episode of stomach ache. So you don't treat this as a very serious and severe problem. But tell me, if this is happening over and over again, then you say, no, there is something wrong. I think this headache is it's just not going for the past 2 months. Intermittent headache. So your friends would suggest, your family would suggest, "Arey, chashma lag gaya hoga. You go and better check your eyes." So that is one common reason. So this is when you actually go and seek help. So keep a look around, and if you find that your friends, your fraternity, someone close to you, have suddenly started displaying these symptoms more frequently than before, then that definitely, brings us close to actual problem areas. Substance abuse is, one thing that I would definitely point out here is not something that can happen not even once in a month or once in 6 months. You have to keep away from tobacco and cigarettes. So there is no such thing that, oh sir, I mean, nobody would dare say that to me, none of my students at least. But if you are telling your friend, for example, that no, no, I just have one cigarette a day, ek se kuch nahi hota, no hota hai, it's all wrong. One cigarette is wrong, or one packet of cigarettes is wrong for a day. So you better remember that it's substance abuse. The very reason why you are smoking or chewing tobacco or pan masala or stuff like that itself means that there is a certain underlying problem. Then let's talk about certain emotional problems. What are the common symptoms that you see? It's irritability, depression, mood swings, outbursts, impatience, anxiety, lack of interest. Again, we come back to the same point. Is there a time in your life when you have never felt irritated at all? Hopefully not with my presentation. I hope seriously. But then there are times when you get irritated ki band karo yaar, I mean, please stop this. When you are in this situation, maybe it's with a co-passenger in a bus, maybe you are in a theater watching a movie and someone is continuously talking on the cell phone, and you get irritated ki come on yaar, let me watch a movie, please, shut down your cell phone. So maybe teachers, students fortunately are more well behaved now. So whatever that you are like irritated with, if it's happening once in a while, if it's something that has a very specific cause, you can see that, identify that very clearly in the surrounding, you might as well say that okay, that was once in a while. But now tell me, if a person is getting irritated all the time, all right, 5 times in a day, irritated with friends, irritated somewhere in the office, irritated somewhere with siblings in the family, irritated with the neighbor, this that all the time, if a person is staying irritated, Well, that definitely brings us close to problem areas. And in this way, if you look at each and every one of this symptom, you'll find that yes, sir, this happens to me once in a while. But then, like I said, you have to keep a tab of yourself and around the people around you, that why is it that this is happening more frequently with you? If that is the reason, then I think we need to seek some professional help. Then there are some very interesting facets about cognitive areas, or the problems related to cognitive areas. Cognition, as we call it, is information processing. In simple terms, the thinking part. All right, as you receive information from the surrounding, from the environment, you process it, you understand it, and then you act upon it. When you are doing this, how do you exactly think and how do you make your inferences? Say, for example, dichotomous thinking. If there are people, dichotomous means two. So if there are people who want to look and do keep looking at this world only in black and white, only us versus them, all right, then they definitely will have problems in adjustment. So no matter what, either a person loves me completely or straight away hates me. No, that is not the way. If you have 10 friends, two of them would be fast friends. There are some friends, who are, yes, good friends, you will say, and then others you will say, "Ki, yes, I know him very well." So you can see the difference between a very fast friend, a close friend, and someone whom you happen to know and you have good relations with. Okay, so you don't go watch movies, with people whom you just happen to know every day, but you just have a hi hello relationship with them. In dichotomous type of thinking, people are like, you have to love me unconditionally, I'm your best friend, accept that, or you do not love me at all. These type of problems they start setting, and then people start becoming possessive. The moment this individual feels that this other person is talking with someone else, is going to a movie with someone else or something, this person suddenly becomes extremely restless, that, oh, you don't love me anymore, you don't like me anymore. Why? Because you are nowadays talking with that person. You have seen such people around you. That is dichotomous thinking. You are not able to see the huge bandwidth, as you could call, of relationships. And then selective abstraction, for example. See, I'll give you a very simple example. You meet 10 people in a day. All right, just for the sake of an example, 10 people in a day. Nine of them actually talk very nicely to you. Oh, sir, hi, how are you? Very nice. Oh, maybe let's say there's this particular presentation. You give a lecture, or there is a student who makes a presentation in front of the class, and everybody says, "Oh, wow, very nice, well done." Out of those 10 people, only one person says, "Arre, kuch khas nahi hua hai. Not a very good thing, yaar. Okay, okay." What happens is, in selective abstraction, the person is focusing only on that one person who did not appreciate. So those nine appreciations go away, and for the next 2 days, 3 days, it is that person. He goes to bed and is continuously thinking of that person. Why did he say this to me? Someone says one single thing to you and you take it to bed with you. You continuously think upon that, so you are selectively abstracting. And in this way, I won't go talking on each and every one of them, but because cognitive problems are a bit different from the earlier behavioral emotional problems, I just thought I would mention them a bit in detail. Arbitrary inferences are without understanding the consequences, or the causes, reasons why something happened. You draw your own inference. Overgeneralization is, like I said, that in selective abstraction, you do one person says something is not good, you believe the entire world is against you. Forgetfulness and nervous talking, like sir was mentioning, someone might be too stressed to talk, what we call as social phobia in psychology. This is also an example of a certain cognitive deficit that the person has. And then some physiological or bodily problems. Now, these could again range from sleep disturbances to eating disorders to fatigue, feeling tired all the time, that is frequently falling ill, headaches, ulcers, grinding teeth in sleep. So all these things put together, they can fall under, and they do fall under the category of physiological or bodily problems. Now, if you look at this list once again, I'm very sure we come back to the same thing, that yes, sir, once in a while this happens to be, but what is that once in a while? Once you don't fall asleep, you don't catch good sleep, it might be for a couple of days, 2 days, 3 days, that's okay, and once again things go back to normal, fine. But if this is happening continuously for the last 6 months, then you could say there is some tremendous underlying stress, loss of appetite, fatigue. It's something that each one of us has experienced. Tell me someone amongst us who have never felt tired in life. That means you don't do any work at all. So having fatigue in itself is not a problem. So please don't try to look at it from this perspective that fatigue bole to problem. No, fatigue is not a problem. But if a person is complaining of fatigue all the time, my body is aching and I feel tired, and I don't feel like doing anything, but what is the reason? And you don't find any substantial cause for that, this could be again a problem behavior. So these are some of the areas where we have to be alert, and we have to keep on observing. And as we observe knowingly or unknowingly our friends, and we see certain changes in their behavior, it is very important that we raise the red flag, and we bring these to the notice of the friend, the family, and try to bring them to a counselor. Now let's take a look at some of the important causal factors that are responsible for all these problem behaviors. Now, causal factors again are on many dimensions, and there are so many of them that it's again difficult to put them all into one presentation. But some of the most important ones, the first dimension is the biological causal factors. So, just for example, let's say genetic, biophysical, and neuroendocrinal. There are many more of them, but I'll just give you a brief idea as to what the causal factors could be. Each and every one of us now knows what genetics is all about, what genes are, what DNA is all about. Now, if at all, like you do, sort of. By way of heredity, you get the voice, the facial, what structure and the looks of your parents, or you could say the height and weight and other physical features of your parents. Similarly, by way of heredity, there are certain disorders, not all of them. I mentioned this earlier also, not everything runs in the family, not everything is genetic. But that does not mean that nothing is genetic. No, yes, there are certain disorders that are definitely genetic in nature. In psychology, we conduct concordance studies, or we call it a co-concordance, or simply nowadays a concordance rate, as to, for example, if there are identical twins, and then there are dizygotic twins, monozygotic, dizygotic, and siblings, adopted children, and then studies are conducted for the prevalence of schizophrenia. It is found that the highest concordance rates are in identical twins, followed by dizygotic twins or fraternal twins. So here what you find is the dizygotic twins are as good as siblings. Their genetic content is different. In monozygotic, it's identical. However, the environment is the same in which they grow up. And then as you go to siblings, again the genetic content is maybe let's say 50% they are different, and the environment also changes further. And adopted genetics are completely different, but environment is the same. So in this way, when studies are conducted, you do find that yes, there is a genetic cause. Nowadays, with gene mapping and the human genome project having been completed, and about 30 or 1000 25 to 30,000 genes that have been identified, nowadays things are moving at a very rapid pace, and you actually do find that certain genes for these disorders are being identified. Now that brings us to, I'll just mention that and leave it here because we cannot have a discussion on that. If there is a concept of gene therapy, that can you alter some of the genes that are causing disorders and problems, and then so that you actually sort of stop the progression of this particular disorder down the generations. But that also raises certain ethical questions, what you call as designer babies. Now, will parents start sort of demanding that my child should be very tall and should be very fair and should have these traits and those traits? So let's say, for example, this female foeticide that we are talking about. So having a sonography is a wonderful thing, it's a very good diagnostic tool, but unfortunately that is being used to what conduct abortions because a girl child is being born, which is extremely unfortunate. So when you talk about problem areas and you talk about therapies, you also have to take into account certain things which unfortunately can have a larger social consequence. So that is about genetics and identifying those genes that are causing problems, and people are working on those therapies let's talk about biophysical, structures in the brain. The brain is obviously a physical entity, and let's say if there is an edema, there's a swelling. All right, there are, an what you could say, an expansion of the cranial space. For instance, the cerebrospinal fluid, for example, gets stuck up and the cranium expands. What you have is a consequent disorder. So this is entirely biophysical in nature. For example, a person might have a swelling on any other part of the body, but if unfortunately that happens on the brain, then you have a situation where, certain symptoms of disorders are immediately seen. And then you have the neuroendocrinal system. Everybody is aware of the concept of, neurons and neurotransmitters nowadays. So you remember that beautiful movie Lage Raho Munna Bhai, in which, the character of Munna Bhai says, mere dimag mein chemical locha hua hai. So this chemical locha is all about those neurotransmitters. You have serotonin, for example. If there is an imbalance of serotonin, the consequent mood disorder is evident. So what one can see when you observe these biological factors is, this is not something that a person is directly able to control and handle. What happens is, out of my observation, I'll share this with you. When we refer, or a counselor, and from counselor to psychiatrist, many a times they give certain medicines, and people are very reluctant to take these medicines. Why? Because they say, oh, this gives me a lot of drowsiness. Yes, that could be an unfortunate side effect, I do agree. But people are very reluctant to take medicines. They feel that this will be for the rest of their lives, but they don't understand that you cannot tell a person, for example, who is suffering from diabetes, can you tell a person to control a sugar? How many times I've told you, control your sugar, control. Arey, how can you speak and control your sugar? Unfortunately, no, you can't do that. Insulin, that is by sugar, I mean the pancreas and the insulin. So you have to take medication for that. You have to take medicines for that. Otherwise, your sugar will not be in control. The same logic applies to many psychological disorders. So if you have any patient around you who refuses to take medication, and who says ki, no, no, without medicines also, or many a time the family members are like, excuse me, we will talk to him, and we will explain it to him, हम कितना समझाया, समझता ही नहीं है, इसको समझाने की जरूरत है. So no समझना वमझना, see, this is not going to work. Give them a best example of insulin and diabetes. Tell them, is there a single patient that you have seen who has been cured of diabetes simply by way of counseling? No. For that purpose, you have to take medication. The same applies here also, and we have to, leave that decision to the doctor. So we are, unfortunately, Google is, in one way abused when it comes to medications. So let us leave that to doctors. Yes, taking a second opinion is perfectly legitimate, but these choices should better be done by doctors. Then there are certain, causal factors whom we would describe as psychological in nature. They could be psychodynamic, they could be certain learned behaviors, and they could be familial, interpersonal in nature. Now, what are psychodynamic factors? Now, psychodynamic is something, that creeps from the philosophy of Dr. Sigmund Freud, where he says suppressions, a large amount of suppression of thought, of actions, of motives, of emotions leads to abnormal behavior. And catharsis, speaking it out, is one way. So don't suppress too much of your thoughts and emotions. It's good to have friends. That is where friends are very, very important, where you can, talk freely. And I'm talking about real life friends. I'm not talking about stupid Facebook friends who are out there only to show that, they had a wonderful vacation somewhere and they just want likes for that. I'm talking about some good, wonderful real life friends. Then you must be aware of this very famous experiment by Ivan Pavlov, who was a Russian physiologist who went on to win, a Nobel Award in physiology. But his experiment on conditioning is very important. So this also brings to the fore the concept that no matter how much we think that we are extremely learned, intelligent creatures, but some of our responses, even now, you can correlate that with animals, whether dogs or rats. The experiments in psychology, they will tell you. So your learned behaviors, is simply those, responses that receive a lot of reinforcement, you keep on doing that over and over again. And many bad behaviors, as you call, I mean, those responses that are maladaptive in nature, those maladaptive adaptive responses are also learned. I'll just give one example and move ahead. For example, the person, a well-grown person, always starts crumbling to pressure and starts crying and starts, let's say a woman in the house starts crying, oh, this problem, starts crying. What happens is the child in the family is observing, and the child learns that this is the way to react to a problem. So next time there is a problem, what do I have to do? I have to cry. So these behaviors, maladaptive behaviors, are learned behaviors many a times. And then there are familial, interpersonal, broken families, for example, very unfortunate situations where there are maybe deaths or divorces, or there is abuse in the family. If these things are happening, that also can be one of the areas where the person is not able to develop good interpersonal relationships and a good mental hygiene. Then I'll quickly move on to some of the cognitive factors. I'll just mention about one beautiful theory by Albert Ellis, and then I'll move ahead. Simply remember it in terms of ABC. What is ABC? Well, here A stands for antecedent, something that has happened. So see, whatever happens in this world is independent of you, and we usually do not understand that. Whatever is happening in this world, look around you, and that is independent of you. Take this COVID for example. Why did this happen to me? Well, there's no question of why it happened to you. It's happening there. Some virus somewhere in China got loose and it's traveling all over the world. It is happening independent of you. So you really do not have control over each and every situation in life. And then comes the beliefs that are rational and irrational in nature. So why did this happen? Well, it's because, because of some certain sins that I have committed, that this is happening to me. This is because people don't like me, this is happening to me. Because this is someone is scheming and planning against me, this is happening to me. So these are beliefs that you hold that are irrational, or they could be rational in nature. And then finally you have the consequences, which could be positive or negative. I was giving an example. We celebrated this World Mental Health Day, last month, and I was giving a very simple example. I'll just allow me to repeat that. If a friend forgets to invite you for the party, so he is hosting a party for whatever his birthday, forgets to invite you, this forgetfulness on part of the friend is an antecedent over which you have absolutely no control. But what are their beliefs? यार खाई गड़बड़ में रह गया होगा, might be in a rush, so just happen to forget that. A typical marriage invitation you don't receive from a relative, and oh my god, then it's like all your ego is so deeply hurt. But it's just a matter that someone forgets that. It's not something really so serious, but your irrational beliefs, oh, he did that on purpose to me because he wanted to show me in a poor light as compared to others and stuff like that. And what are the consequences? All negative in nature. If you hold some rational beliefs, that what difference does it make if someone does not invite me to a party or does not invite me to a marriage? It's perfectly all right. It's his or her choice. Let's move ahead in life. See, all your problems simply vanish away at the snap of a finger. Further to ABC, they added D and E. D is disputation of beliefs. So when these beliefs are disputed from irrational to rational, naturally what happens is there is a new effect. So E is for effect. And these consequences, they start turning from negative to positive, as simple as that. Now, I'll just mention about two important organizations and their work. One is the World Health Organization, WHO, as you all know that, and the American Psychiatric Association. So what are these disorders? Principal sir did mention, some of these disorders. So let's also take a look at some of them. The ICD publishes, the WHO publishes ICD, the International Classification of Disorders. The current, what you call, edition is ICD 11. And DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Currently, we have the 5th edition published by the APA. Excuse me. Now, the World Health Organization, the ICD published by the World Health Organization, it covers all parts of the mind and body. In the sense, all physical, mental disorders are covered, whereas the Psychiatric Association, the DSM, covers only mental health related problems. Now, the thing is, the ICD draws its authorship globally. It takes into account like the virus, for example. Presently, any virus, any bacteria, any causal factor, everything is taken into account. But one of the shortcomings of DSM is that it is relatively focused on North America. Now, naturally, the name itself is American Psychiatric Association, but it's used globally, and their focus, unfortunately, is quite limited to North America. But the compounding problems are that primarily, many times the DSM is used for diagnosis, but the ICD codes are used for insurance and billing purposes. So that is somewhere, finds itself in a fix. And now DSM has also started, coding their own disorders in a proper way. So DSM 5 is, relatively far better, it is supposed, than the earlier editions. Now, let's talk about some of the disorders that are listed by the ICD. So, anxiety or fear related disorders, these are like umbrella terms. So, under anxiety and fear related, you would have many disorders due to substance abuse, addictive behaviors, mood disorders, neurocognitive disorders. You have heard of, at least childhood disorders like what you call Asperger's syndrome, for example. And we have seen this slow learners and Tare Zameen Par wala concept and all. These are many a times neurocognitive disorders. Then you have obsessive compulsive disorders, personality disorders, schizophrenia, and other disorders. So these are clubbed, and the list is very long. I've just put in a few examples over here. This is the way the WHO actually classifies the disorder, so that we are able to communicate properly with the scientific community. There is one thing that I would like to bring into the notice, because there is an overwhelming student population over here, that the ICD has now actually officially identified a gaming disorder. And I hope all the students are very keenly listening to this and reading this. What is a gaming disorder? A pattern of persistent or recurring gaming behavior, digital or video gaming. So all of you, the students especially, you better be careful that what you think, sir, the game is what, only half an hour a day, 1 hour a day. Well, that is what people who smoke cigarettes, they say, sir, only 1 or 2 cigarettes are not a big area, problem area, wo tum kabhi bhi chhod denge. But you see, for the last 10 years, 15 years, they are not leaving it. The same is happening with gaming disorders. And then you see where, a student actually committed suicide because his cell phone was taken away, or he hit his parents, or ran away from home. These are actually gaming disorders. This is identified as the disorder. And then another change that was brought about recently is gender incongruence. So now, with the focus on gay, LGBT, and these communities, it is not taken as a disorder, but rather as a sexual health condition. So that is not treated as a disorder anymore. So just, I thought I would highlight a few changes just for the sake of an example. Now, the DSM has eliminated the multi-axial system. There used to be 5 axes in DSM-4 4R. So we have disorders that are now classified by type, and they're clustered same as ICD, but they have a different set of categories. 21 of them, again, under an umbrella, where you would find disorders like these: anxiety disorders, bipolar, depressive, feeding and eating, obsessive compulsive personality disorders. These are some of the examples of DSM-5. Now, I'll tell you, there are certain differences also, because as students of forensic psychology, you might at some point of time in your professional career face such situations. ADHD, this is now added in ICD. It was always there in DSM-5, but attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, this was not included in ICD earlier. Now they have included that. But at the same time, they have removed acute stress disorder. They said that that's not really a disorder. It is only a reaction to stress, which can stay for a certain duration. Let's not call it a disorder, but DSM still calls it. They have included something called an oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD. What is that? The term will tell you. Oppositional defiant disorders. Those children who react violently to their parents and teachers, they retort, they immediately, get into a huge argument and start shouting at their parents or teachers. That is now treated as a disorder. So that is, again, a question that has been raised, that do you call such students really mentally ill or not? That is another just a controversial area. I'll just give you 2 examples before I sum up. Let's say anxiety or a fear related disorder. Let's say phobia, for example. Now, in phobia, this is an example of acrophobia. a fear of high places, a fear of water, hydrophobia, or fire, or darkness, and so on and so forth. So these are exaggerated or irrational fears, and these symptoms are limited to a brief episode. See, falling down from a high place, well, that's definitely going to cause a problem. But if you are there properly in a balcony and there is proper scaffolding, and there is proper security, still people are extremely afraid. That is exaggerated or irrational. So this stays only until these people are there, near the balcony or near the window. But the moment you take them away, rest of the life you might not even quite realize that these people, or people suffering from such disorders, anxiety disorders, they actually have a huge underlying problem. And this definitely does not require hospitalization. So like I said, what we think as normal, that you and me, we are normal, we might have certain underlying problems which we actually unfortunately never address. Of the schizophrenias, there are many subtypes of schizophrenia again, but what is common is a complete disruption of thought, of behavior, and emotions. So a person with phobia moves around in society. He could be your friend, he could be your cousin, he could be there in your family, and you don't quite realize it, or you just brush it aside. ठीक है यार, क्या अरे डरता है वो, अरे what, he is afraid of this, and you forget it and you move ahead in life. But with schizophrenia, these problems are far too severe in nature. They are accompanied many a times by hallucinations and delusions. What are hallucinations? When you see things in the absence of stimulus, so you are having perceptions in the absence of stimulus. What are delusions? These are wrong notions that people hold about themselves or the world around them. So someone believes he's a big emperor, someone believes she is a big poet, and starts hearing voices around when none of them exist. And then life in general is affected. Like here, rest of the life goes on normally. Here life is affected, and many a times hospitalization is needed. Now, I'll just mention a couple of laws because you are all students of forensic psychology. The Mental Health Care Act of 2017 has brought in some very, very welcome changes that were not there in the 87 Act. And here, all healthcare services and many, rights are now granted to people with disorders. They have a right to live. You cannot refuse a person to buy a house in your colony or whatever, or refuse a job because a person has had a non-discrimination and right to live in a community. All these are now entered into this law. Now you can always pause this and watch this later. I've just mentioned a few acts that relate to civil laws and criminal laws also. For example, who commit a crime are dealt with under what sections over here. And now suicide has been removed, it has been decriminalized in the 2017 bill. So these are some of the acts which you could refer to in your own free time. And as far as criminal responsibilities are concerned, here this brings us again very close to forensic science and psychology put together. So according to the IP, not an offense if done by a person who is of unsound mind. So at the time of the crime especially. So this is one thing that you all are going to need to deal with. How do you know whether a person is of unsound mind or was of unsound mind at the time of the particular crime that was committed? So this is a challenge in front of you as a forensic psychologist. And then certain civil responsibilities. We don't have time because I believe we would be, it's 4:28 already. So I'm towards the end of, consuming that entire 1 hour of yours. So you could go through some of these, some of the, the will that is written by this person, or, voting in elections or adoption. There are certain limitations on that, but they are also protected at the same time, because someone might just write any will from this person and ask the person to sign. Well, no, the court will hold it in favor of the person and will say he was of unsound mind and just gave away the property. No, this actually legally belongs to that person. Now when you talk about a forensic psychologist having to decide as to whether there is an underlying mental disorder, or at least it was at the time the crime was committed or not, how do you assess mental disorder? This is the last part of the presentation, where number one, you have clinical assessment. A clinical assessment is where you actually conduct an interview, and I'll not go into technical details now because paper and pencil tests and projective techniques put together are also part of clinical assessment. So clinical assessment is obviously a broader category, but then you are making a broad assessment of the individual based on your interviews, based on your various tests and techniques, and you decide whether the person is of unsound mind or not, and if at all, what is the underlying disorder that could be there. There are certain very wonderful paper and pencil tests like the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, a very, very famous test. And you have the NEO-PI. You might be having some tests in your syllabus also. So these tests, they actually help you evaluate your own mental status. There are various what you call dimensions that are measured over here, like the dimensions or the disorders I showed you in the earlier slide. There is hysteria that is measured, there are depressive facets that are measured, anxiety that is measured, and a person, where he or she falls, you could actually get this with the help of a graph. So the moment you see this, you will go over here. Now this is not very clear and legible right now, but you can go and find out what exactly problem area are we talking about, and this is where the person definitely has a problem. So you can go and identify the problem area. And then there are certain projective techniques, because paper and pencil test could be having certain limitations. A person might be able to respond to it, or if he or she responds, might try to give certain quoted responses. Projective techniques are used. For example, you see this picture in front of you. Now if I had to ask you a question, what exactly do you see? Just take 5 seconds, 10 seconds to look at the picture, look at it very keenly, and try and tell me. Of course, now we are unfortunately online, so we I won't be able to hear you, but you can ask this question to yourself: what you see. Now you can see anything. Somebody might see a butterfly, somebody sees a seahorse over there, somebody sees a man who is running, somebody who sees a boy who is falling. Actually, there is nothing over here. This is just an ink blot. All right, this is ambiguous. Then what is it that you see? It comes in from your unconscious. You are projecting your thoughts onto this particular picture, and hence it is known as projective technique. So this is one way in which psychologists, they try to identify those underlying behaviors. So I think with this, it is time for me to sort of take your leave. Thank you very much, Vikram, for your invitation. Thank you, Zadhav sir, Deshpande sir, Mari ma'am, and all the wonderful faculty members, and all the audience. Thank you for your patient listening. So with this, I think I should conclude my session here. If there are any question and answers, I would be happy to try and answer them. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Session, and it will be very helpful to the participants. Now this session is open for questions. If there are any questions from participants, they can ask now.
Okay, I can see a question here, sir. Please tell us more about bipolar disorder. Rajat wants to know. Well, bipolar disorder, as the name tells you, there are two poles, as we know, the North Pole and the South Pole that the Earth has. Similarly, bipolar means there are two poles. So one end is depression, and the other end is what you call as ecstasy, or elation. So the person keeps on swinging between depression to mania. Earlier it used to be called a manic depressive disorder, MDP. Now the term that is used is bipolar. So MDP and bipolar, that's just a difference in terminology. So from the manic phase to the depressive phase. So there is a unipolar disorder and there's a bipolar disorder. Unipolar means there is only depression. There is no unipolar mania. There is only unipolar depression. So a person is into depression, back to normal, depression to normal. So that is unipolar. In bipolar, there are mood swings. if you look at your life every day, we all have mood swings. In the morning, you went to the, college, you were very happy about something. While coming home, you were very sad about something happened in the college. So these mood swings, they happen occasionally. They do happen with all of us. Nobody lives, like homeostasis. We maintain a certain temperature of the body. We never maintain a very uniform mood, so as to say. But when these mood swings go to an extent that, number one, there is no underlying causal factor. You went happy to the college because you had a presentation, you had a test, and you thought you had, prepared very well, but you came back, believing that, no, oh my god, everything tanked and it was a very bad presentation. So if at all you have a cause for that, you can understand. But when these mood swings start happening without a proper identifiable cause, we are talking about a problem area. So in bipolar disorder, once again, serotonin is supposed to be, there are certain monoamine, suppressors, and serotonin. These neurochemicals nowadays are found to play a far more crucial role. But yes, there are psychological factors that actually trigger these disorders rather than being very, precisely causal factors. They are precipitating factors. That is what it's believed. Right? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Now there is another question in the chat box. This
Yes.
question is from Pagashri ma'am. Question is
Uh-huh.
how to deal with selective abstraction.
Yes, there was a question, and I can also see how to deal with dichotomous thinking. All right. See, I'll tell you, the thought process is something that is continuous in nature and something that you have to change, you have to mold, you have to train. What is education all about? You tell me. Education is not about getting a degree, it is about your training your mind and your brain to work in a certain way. So, what does your family tell you? What are these ethics and values that we are talking about? These are all ways in which you train your mind to do something and not to do another. Okay. What happens with these, thought processes is it is very naturally that some of them get skewed. They go in a certain direction that is not healthy for the individual. So the first thing is, it's very important that you identify that there are certain processes like these. And the second thing is, once you come to know that yes, this does happen, that there is abstractive thinking or there is dichotomous, thinking that is happening. Number one, expand your cognitive horizons. Now, what do you do exactly by saying that? See, the way you look at the world around, it's through your cognitive window. So there's like a window through which you are looking at the world outside. The narrower the window, more the problems for you, because you are not able to take into account the larger world perspective. What your religion tells you, it's a narrow perspective. Look at the world only from my religious point of view. What caste tells you, only to look at the world from your own narrow perspective. What these provincial affiliations and race and gender, what they tell you is look at the world in narrow perspective. So for example, let's talk about gender. Today you have women who are, doing some fantastic work in so many fields. Are men ready to accept that? We still have an era of khap panchayats, and we have brutal rapes that are happening only simply because a woman, resists and says no. See, these are patterns of thinking that the society has to change. And there is no one single counseling session you do and you change that. This is what education is supposed to do. This is what, the entire family setup and society has to do. So the moment you start thinking, in different ways, the moment you start accepting new thoughts and ideas, you'll find that your dichotomous thinking has very slowly but surely fizzled away. And this is, dear friends, not just about one particular area of thought. It's being about, being open to new thoughts and ideas. In the neo pi, you have what you call dimension of openness. So if you go and check yourself on that, you might actually find to what extent are you open to new thoughts and ideas and to what extent you are not to. Okay.
Thank you, sir. There are some questions still in the chat box. Sir, I will repeat the question for participants. The question is
Mhm.
from Gaurangi Madne. What's the most important difference between forensic psychology and criminal psychology?
Okay, okay, yes, I can see that. Right, it's there. See, forensic psychology actually assists the law. all right, in trying to identify the cause of crime and the culprit. Let us put it in very simple words. All right, so we are, as a forensic psychologist, you are supporting the law, trying to identify as to who really committed the crime. Okay, criminal psychology is a bit different, wherein you are trying to, number one, prevent crime from happening, because you try to identify what are the causal factors. So for example, you identify social factors, you go and tell the society, I mean in the society, I mean you write articles about that, you tell the government, you bring about awareness about that, that these factors are leading to crime. I'll give you a very simple example. It's not directly from criminal psychology, but something that you will immediately identify with. We have stopped the beaming of advertisements of cigarettes and wine, alcohol in movies and in televisions. Advertisements are completely banned now. Even if an old movie, if at all you see the hero smoking a cigarette, there is immediately a line that appears that cigarette smoking is injurious to health. Now you cannot go and edit those movies way back. So that was creative freedom and liberty granted in one era. Now we understand that people are actually emulating their icons, their idols. And because this XYZ, smokes a cigarette, I also find it. I mean, I don't, but just for example, a teenager finds it ki, wow, kya cigarette piya, maja aa gaya. I'm doing something that this actor is doing. When you identify these, problem areas, you immediately bring about a change in society. Same is about criminal psychology. You try to bring about a change in society by trying to prevent children becoming criminals, adults also for that matter, especially the focus is on juveniles and adults becoming criminals, and into the reform system. So instead of just dumping someone into jail, can we bring about reform? So that is where the focus of criminal psychology is. Okay, a lot of questions actually.
Thank you, sir. There is one more question from one of our faculty members. What is the difference between insanity and phased insanity?
Insanity and staged insanity.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, see, these terms are a bit archaic. Insanity is, again, as I said, nowadays you would simply refer to as a mental disorder. A fake or a staged insanity, as you call it, there is, what we call as convergent disorders. That is a class of disorders in psychology in which there are people who actually have a lot of physical symptoms of certain disorders, and then there are people who fake these symptoms in order to gain benefits of those disorders. So yes, there are people who actually fake insanity. Now the question is, why do they do that? Because number one, they get attention. All right, not insanity to the extent of going crazy and what is shown in movies and all that, but yes, whatever disorder that people are faking, number one, they get benefits out of that. They get all the attention. You remember your childhood days when someone, a child falls ill, everybody comes asking, beta, how are you? Are you okay? So the child gets all the attention. And the child learns that by falling ill, everyone comes close to me and starts asking me, and I become so important in the family. If these sort of behaviors are learned, the person starts faking these insanities. All right. Number two, it relieves you of a lot of, work. For example, nobody asks a sick child to actually go and clean up the kitchen. The same is with a professional place. If you find that a colleague is very sick, you'll naturally say that, oh, sir, please take rest. We will manage this. So people, find many benefits out of falling sick, and that is the way slowly but surely they do start faking insanity. That is unfortunate, but yes, these things at times they do happen. Okay, Vikram.
Thank you, sir. This was the question from one of your students, Mr. Gaurav Varade.
Okay, okay.
So due
Yes,
to time limitations, we cannot cover all these questions. So remaining
yes.
questions, we will forward those questions from email ID. So please,
Yes. I will. It's a pleasure all the way that I would, try and answer each and every question. Yes,
so I
we'll
would
do that.
request you, sir, to share your email ID with the participants.
Oh, you want me to share it here?
Or we can share it later on to the Telegram group.
No, why don't you just take the questions and mail it to me? I'll mail it back, you know.
Okay, sure,
There
sir.
are some questions. I'll mail it back with pleasure. Okay.
Now,
Chalo.
I would like to request Mr. Vikram Hunkare for the vote of thanks for this session.
So good evening, all. It's my privilege that I have been asked for giving vote of thanks on this occasion again. So on behalf of the YC Institute of Science, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have directly or indirectly contributed to our webinar. As the outset, I would like to extend my gratitude to our today's chief guest and resource person, Dr. Vilas Padesa. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence. Thank you, sir, for your encouragement. You gave an excellent coverage to this topic. We are all inspired by your great word. We are thankful to our honorable principal for his enthusiastic support. A special thanks to my team, Forensic Science, teaching and non-teaching staff for their unflinching support. Our heartfelt thanks to our students for their active participation. Thank you, one and all, for giving your tremendous response to this webinar. With these warm words and a kind message, we move to the end of this session. Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. So,
Thank you, sir. With the permission from dignitaries, I declare this session is over. And there will be a second session on day after tomorrow, that is 21st October. And we will see you at 3 p.m.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.